what are the penalties when it comes to not paying child support? If someone is not meeting their obligation, what's their exposure?
Typically, what would happen is
All right. Hi, everyone. I'm Katie VanDeusen, the managing partner of Sterling Hughes, and this is the Illinois Family Law Insider. I'm here today with Senior Associate Jacqueline McClellan. Thanks for joining me today, Jacqueline.
thanks, Katie. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So, we are set to talk today about enforcing child support in Illinois and what parents really need to know when it comes to enforcing child support. So, I feel like as attorneys, we always get a lot of questions about unpaid child support. And I think today we want to highlight some of the big questions like when should someone hire an attorney? What happens when a child turns 18 or graduates from high school? And what penalties could possibly apply if you are not current with your child support obligation? So, very first question, Jacqueline. What are some signs that you've seen that someone should really stop waiting and get legal help when it comes to enforcement for child support?
Yeah, absolutely. So, we get this question all the time. So, you know, 1 month, maybe they miss their child support. They say they're going to make it up. You're on to 2 months. They still haven't paid that child support. Around that 2 month to 3 month mark, I'd say that's probably the time that you want to seek out some legal help because you don't want that number to keep climbing. If you're receiving child support, you probably need it for your children. So it's definitely going to be beneficial to you to start and seek out some help somehow to get that child support that you're entitled to.
And do you ever talk to your clients, Jacqueline, about kind of like the cost benefit analysis there? Because, you made a perfect point of what if it's 1 month? What if it's 2 months? Even maybe, at the 2 month mark, how does that cost benefit analysis come into play as to when is the right time to move forward?
Yes, absolutely. So what you're going to want to consider is how much is that child support versus how much is it going to cost me to actually enforce this action. So depending on how much your child support is, you may want to move sooner than later. So that's what I would take into account.
Absolutely. And I don't know if you've ever experienced this, but I feel like sometimes I have in the past where someone will come to you and say, I need help with enforcement. And my next question is, of what? And sometimes you can even run into cases where you're not only seeking to enforce the monthly child support amount, but maybe an additional support obligation or contribution to child related expenses. So when you look at the case as a whole, that makes sense to move forward on versus maybe, like you just said, a 1 month of a missed payment is not really going to be enough to come in and fire the alarm, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. You got to look at the case cumulatively. So if it's child support and then maybe your child's involved in hockey and hockey's really expensive, maybe it does make sense to move quicker than to wait. You don't want your child to be kicked out of hockey because those child expenses aren't being paid because you're not getting your child support and your child expenses. So it just
Exactly.
completely depends.
Yep, I totally agree. And then next question, kind of in the same vein, is can the state help enforce or collect support? And if so, what are some of the pros and cons that you're aware of when it comes to that?
So depending on your income threshold, the state can absolutely help you. And pros to that is, it could potentially be free, which is great. A big con that I have noticed throughout my practice is they take forever, especially depending on the county. So, you have to weigh those factors. Like, do you really want to wait? You've already waited 2 months to maybe enforce the child support, and then maybe you're waiting 5 more months or 6 more months to potentially actually see any benefit to seeking out help through the state. So while the cost to you is little to none, the benefit, probably outweighs that if you're, or the, I'm sorry, the negatives probably outweigh that pro.
Yeah, definitely a good thing to note that there are pros and cons to that route. And each person is kind of just going to have to make the decision based on their circumstance, right? And willing to compromise and do in their particular circumstance.
Exactly.
Okay, and then next question that always pops up, I feel, is what tools can an attorney use to enforce support? So let's say someone owes the support obligation, they end up entering a judgment. So the judge finds that they do, in fact, owe a set amount. What are the next steps from there? What do you do?
Yeah. So attorneys have this nifty tool called an income withholding order, where you can actually have, so long as the other party is employed, you can take that child support and that arrearage, the amount that is left unpaid, a portion of that from the check each month. So that's a great tool to use if you just can't rely on this person to pay you directly. You can even potentially garnish their wages, or potentially freeze their bank accounts. You can potentially have a lien against their property. There's multiple options available, and even with that, if they owe outstanding child support, that arrearage that I previously mentioned, you can even ask for statutory interest, which I believe is 9% right now, in addition to the child support that they owed.
So that could really add up over time too. And that goes right back to our first point, which was that cost benefit analysis, right? It may not only be a couple of months of missed payments. If you add on that 9% annual interest for statutory interest, that could add up fast too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Great points. And then, Jacqueline, one question too. Have you ever seen a circumstance or a case come your way where maybe the person first started to go through the state, but because their case stalled or they aren't getting their questions answered or the state is just really delayed, have they ever come to you to kind of enforce or seek to enforce that child support obligation?
I actually haven't had that issue yet, but have you?
I actually have. I had a case where it started off where the person went through the state and it took forever and they were so frustrated by the time they came to me, and I ended up explaining those pros and cons. Listen, the state is free, they can help you. Typically it just takes a lot longer, but this person really wanted to get a move on. And based on the amount that was owed, it made sense for them to kind of go through a private attorney. And the one thing that I always try to explain though is when it comes to the state can enforce in ways that sometimes private attorneys can't. So, like, the state can garnish a tax return or a tax refund. As a private attorney, I can't always do the same thing, but there are other avenues like you just described, and where I have absolutely frozen bank accounts and asked to collect on that frozen amount, or implemented like an income withholding order following entry of a judgment. And at least, like, the one thing that I can tell the client is, I may not be free, but I can at least answer your questions in a timely manner, try to handle your case as efficiently and quickly as possible so that you can kind of close this chapter and move on. Because no one likes being stuck in court for an extended, prolonged period of time. So in that instance, it made sense and we were able to help. So, uh,
Wonderful.
yeah. And so moving forward to kind of shifting gears, I feel like this question comes up constantly and I want to hear your perspective on it. So I feel like the question always is, my child turned 18, so now I don't have to pay any child support, right? And I feel like as attorneys, we always have to explain when child support actually terminates and what steps do you have to take to actually get it terminated.
Right. Yeah. So once your child turns 18, or maybe like a month or two in advance of that, you should file a motion to terminate that maintenance, or I'm sorry, child support, because child support will not terminate automatically. So you do have to file that motion to terminate.
So going back to, whether or not child support terminates when a child turns 18, that really isn't always the case. It really depends. So, what is your experience with when support actually terminates? Is it when they turn 18 or not?
So it's either 18 or their graduation from high school. So if they turn 18 while they're in high school, it's that graduation date, but it won't go beyond the age of 19 for that child, absent circumstances such as maybe a child with special needs. Those circumstances, there's other avenues where you can continue child support on because that child requires additional support.
So, just so that I'm on the same page and everybody who's listening understands. So, child support does not automatically terminate, and it is not just when the child turns 18. It's really kind of a two-pronged test. Like, the child has to be 18 and have graduated from high school. It's whichever later occurs in time. So even if you have a child that's in high school that's 18, you have to wait until that graduation date, but it can't go past 19. And if it does, there's got to be special circumstances surrounding that child where maybe there are special needs at play. And that is a completely separate statute. So someone would have to file something kind of proactively to get that type of relief, right, Jacqueline?
Yep, absolutely.
Got it. Okay. And then shifting gears again, what are the penalties when it comes to not paying child support? If someone is not meeting their obligation, what's their exposure?
Right. Yeah. So typically what would happen is, you file that petition to seek that retroactive child or that arrearage, the child support that's left outstanding. And then you can ask for a variety of things. You can ask for attorney's fees. You could ask for that statutory interest that we talked about. They could potentially lose their driver's license or their ability to renew their passport. Or if this is serious enough, you could even ask for them to be thrown in jail.
Wow. Have you ever seen someone be put in jail by a judge, whether it's your own case or maybe just being in the courtroom at the same time as something like that happening?
I have seen it once. It was not my own case, but I have seen someone be thrown in jail for failure to pay child support. I've heard numerous judges threaten it, though.
Yeah, it's gotta be pretty serious to have that happen, but I have definitely seen that as well, in those types of egregious circumstances where it's warranted, where the person's just maybe not paying at all, or the amount that's owed is so extensive that, the judge feels like the person is just completely ignoring, the court order. I always feel tell me your experience, when it comes to this too, Jacqueline, is whenever I have a person who is not meeting their support obligation, I always try to advise them strategically to make some type of payment. Like, listen, we're not all perfect. Maybe you can't meet the obligation to a T, but some type of good faith payment could really make the difference between you having the judge view you as someone who completely disregards their court order in comparison to someone who's at least trying to come into compliance with their court order.
Yeah, I totally agree, or set up some type of payment plan, like, you
Right.
can do that. That is an option. You can try to negotiate something with, your child's parent. So, yeah, I totally agree. The court's gonna view that much more favorably, and may not impose those serious sanctions that they're allowed to do if they see fit.
I totally agree with you. So just wrapping up and kind of summarizing, what's your advice to someone who's been owed support for a while but just isn't sure on what steps to take to start enforcing it?
Right, so first and foremost, my first piece of advice is make sure you're keeping diligent records of those support payments, whether it's child support or child expenses. I know I didn't mention that before, but I think that's very crucial. But then I would definitely advise you to seek out some type of attorney to talk about, you know, maybe go through that cost benefit analysis with the attorney and they can help you decide what time you should start to proceed moving forward. And then you can actually get an idea of kind of what you're looking at, what you may be able to recover from your child's parent.
Definitely. Great points. And then what's one thing you'd say to someone who's behind on child support, who's really trying to keep up with this, but worried about the legal consequences of not paying?
Right. So, first thing that I would consider is, why are you not making those child support payments? Is it something to the point where we need to file a motion to modify? Is it at that point? Or, like we previously discussed, can you make some type of payment? Can we set up some type of payment plan for you to actually become current on those support payments?
Great points, Jacqueline. Thanks so much for joining me to talk through child support enforcement in Illinois. Hopefully, everyone had some great takeaways from the discussion. I know I did. And thanks for joining me today, Jacqueline.
Thanks for having me.
Child support enforcement is just the tip of the iceberg. It all starts with getting the numbers right from day one. Most parents don't realize the damage until they are too deep in debt or dragged back to court. Do you want to avoid this trap? Start with this video right here.